In the heart of the night, this world will burn bright. We will set it alight. In the heart of the night, in the heart of the night, this world will burn bright. We will set it alight. In the heart of the night.
Hello everyone, I am Anthropomantic Fiend and I do horror-related things on the internet. Today I'm going to be talking about Good Against Evil. This is a movie that came out in 1977, and like most movies that came out in the 70s, this is going to be in color. I'm actually doing a movie that's in color and doesn't have Bela Lugosi in it now, which is what I started out doing, but I haven't done that for a while, so I just felt like saying that. Anyway, this movie follows a woman who works at this fashion shop. I'm not sure, she cuts out designs for cloth and stitches together dresses and things, and she meets this guy and they fall in love. But we've already established that there is a satanic cult from years before who has birthed the spawn of Satan and has raised it, and weird stuff starts happening around this woman, and we see Satanists or devil worshippers. They're not obviously not going to be like real occultists, but they're movie occultists. But anyway, they're lurking around and weird seeming coincidences start happening and things just get stranger from there. This is an occult horror movie in that tradition of movies about Satan that you see a lot in the late 60s and into the 70s quite a bit. It opens back in, I believe it's set in 1955 before we flash forward, and it opens with a woman who is going into labor, and she is being taken through this hospital, and she's screaming, "They're trying to take my baby," and she doesn't want to go through with whatever they're trying to do, and she's in great pain, but she's also panicked because of whatever's trying to happen, and it instantly has this sort of Rosemary's Baby vibe to it, and it gives the scene this sense of urgency, and I was really afraid for her. It was a really solid opening scene, and that sort of vibe carries through the movie. It's not the same kind of story as Rosemary's Baby. If anything, it's almost like the aftermath, which I'll get into, but it has the same kind of vibe and similar sort of strange happenings and characters and themes that you'll see in movies like Rosemary's Baby, or before that, The Devil Rides Out, and then I would expect similar things to movies like The Omen or maybe even The Exorcist, and a little bit of Dario Argento's Inferno in one particular way, which I'll get into. It opens with the evil Satanists or occultists or devil worshippers or whatever you want to term them raising a child, which is not that original, but I do enjoy these kinds of stories, and this one was enjoyable, although the story is kind of the best and worst part of the movie. And interestingly, this movie has a lot of suspense to it, which I also liked, because even though we see Satanists throughout the film, and we know that they exist and they're trying to bring about some evil stuff, probably the apocalypse, from the get-go, we never know quite what they're up to, and we really just see them more lurking in the shadows. We see them more and more as the film progresses, and things get weirder and weirder, but it's never completely clear what they're up to. And I like that ambiguity up until a point, at which point I had problems with it, which again, I will get to. Another interesting thing about the story is that the devil in this is specifically called Astaroth. And this is not just what the occultists call Satan. You've got these holy men of the church who show up and fight for the forces of good, and they refer to this movie's devil specifically as Astaroth. And that's interesting because usually you'll hear Satan and Lucifer and Beelzebub, and these will be like separate entities or parts of the same entity or different demons, but in this they always refer to the devil as Astaroth, and Astaroth is the devil, and that's the only name they use for the devil. Both the occultists and these Christian holy men fighting for good or whatever. And I thought that was an interesting choice. I don't think it's good or bad, I just thought it was interesting. One thing that did kind of bother me, just because I'm a stickler for accuracy some ways, is they got the pentagram the wrong way. And in that I mean that they had it right side up, and if you're doing Satan-y stuff, it needs to be upside down, otherwise it's not a Satan-y symbol, it's a pagan symbol. So yeah, that's neither here nor there, because they weren't really trying to go for accuracy in any of these religions, but it bothered me because, again, I'm a stickler for accuracy in some ways. The biggest problem with this story is its ending, because the movie ends on this really ambiguous note, which is not a bad thing with some movies. People talk about the ambiguous ending of The Thing being really good, and the ending to The Birds is very ambiguous, which sort of never resolves itself, and it just leaves you on edge as to what's going to happen. And while in some ways it feels like they're trying to play it off that way in this movie, what it really feels like is they forgot to write an ending for the movie and just decided to shoot it anyway. It just feels like there should be another scene, and then there just isn't. It's like the scene got lost, or they forgot to shoot it, and they were just like, you know what, we're gonna play it off like this is our ambiguous, creepy ending, and it just doesn't work. But I was invested in the story, and then it just kind of drops off, and it's just like, what? Where'd the story go? And that didn't work for me at all. I think it's a good story. It's not the most original story, but it's an engaging one, and then it's just kind of gone. So I don't even know. So story was good until it stops existing. Visually, the movie is, especially in the opening birth scene, full of these sort of strange camera angles and this fluid camera motion, and it gives that sequence in particular this very surreal vibe. You see that a little bit in other scenes, but for the most part in the rest of the movie it's not quite as stylized, but it's good cinematography. This is not their intent, I'm sure, but the colors in this are very washed out. That's, I'm sure, just the print of the movie, but I kind of like that. It has that sort of old, grainy 70s vibe that I enjoy from other movies of the period that are not in the best quality, but it gives them a vibe that I enjoy. And the costumes and the sets are very pretty. In particular, I don't know why I singled this out, because there's a lot of things that I could focus on in this movie, but there's this one jacket that our main character, Jessica, wears. It's just this sort of big, sort of shiny reflective leather jacket, and as soon as I saw it, it was just like, I want a jacket like that, because I don't even know. I just sort of thought it was pretty. Anyway, there's the stuff that the occultists have. There's this altar that they've set up with black candles and this statue of, I don't know if I'd call it Baphomet exactly, but it's this horned entity that's odd. They would call it Astaroth, I'm sure. It's their demon lord. We also see them in this sort of secluded cave somewhere or another with these black candles and this pentagram. I think they actually had it the right way in that scene. Maybe they didn't, I don't remember, but drawn this pentagram in the sand on the cave floor and are trying to talk to Astaroth and bring about the, they have this sort of time is nigh thing, and I enjoyed the look of that scene, both sort of the black robes and the necklaces they wear and all of the occulty stuff. I don't think it's really accurate, as I said, but I am a sucker for sort of sinister, evil, dark aesthetics, and I just enjoyed the way it looked, if nothing else. And the characters in this movie are pretty good. We've got Jessica and her love interest, Andy, and the way they meet is very out of the blue. Andy literally crashes into the side of her car. She's pissed, and he's just like, oh, you know what, I'll go get my insurance contract or whatever. I don't know these things. I don't even know. Anyway, he's just like, you know what, I'm sorry, this thing is expired. Here's the keys to my car. I'm taking the keys to your car and driving away. And she's like, the hell did you just do? and he drives off and then comes back with either a new car or the same car completely repaired and good as new, and they sort of connect with each other. He's very much sort of a jokester and a little bit of a jerk, but is still obviously supposed to be a nice person, and they're both very playful and they're very cute, so I enjoyed them. As soon as the car crashes there and you sort of see the way he's doing, you can kind of see the relationship coming a mile away. It was cute, but you could see it coming like instantly. Shortly after that, you sort of see more of that sort of nice but also a jerk side of him, where he's just like sent her like a bajillion like answering machine messages and letters from all around, just trying to get her to have dinner with him. He set up a time and he's like starved himself for the entire day, and he's just like desperate, it seems like, or just very insistent. And I know I would be annoyed by him, but they were still fun. Later on, they're going on this date and they go up to this guy who's supposed to be a fortune teller, and oh my god, I don't know what they were thinking with this scene. It's the goofiest thing, but it's also a plot point later on. He goes up to like this cardboard box basically that's meant to be painted like one of those like Zoltar fortune teller machines, and like knocks on it. This guy who's clearly this very young person, but he's got a fake beard on and this goofy wizard hat, comes out and he's just like sticks his hand out through the little slot thing and he's just like, I require my payment in silver coinage, and he gives them these little fortunes, and I don't know where they came up with that idea, but it's so ridiculous and I love it. And the reason it's a plot point is, I don't actually totally want to spoil it, but Jessica reads her fortune out loud, Andy does not, and he sort of plays it off as like, oh, I'm gonna become instantly rich and famous, and I'm gonna have 7 cars and a big house and a yacht and my own swimming pool, and I'm gonna marry you. And he's just like, no, what does it really say? And he's playing with her and won't show it to her, and he just says, I love you. And later on, he actually tells us what the fortune actually says, which is interesting. I'll get to that in the spoilers, but it's this really weird scene that comes out of nowhere and yet is somehow also relevant to the plot, so that was interesting. The music is pretty good. It's very spooky and atmospheric, but also happy and peaceful and lovey-dovey when it needs to be. It's nothing special, but it's good. What did stand out to me is in one scene where they're getting particularly romantic with each other, we've got this sax music in the background. It's just like, oh my god, really? Are you really going there? And it was just like, why? But yeah, music is a little bit cheesy, but I enjoy a little cheesiness, so I did not think it was bad. Also, in terms of characters, going back to that, there's also this black cat that recurs throughout the movie who really likes to screw people over, and it's pretty clear that he's in league with Satan, so to speak. And there's a bunch of other kitties which the dark forces manifest themselves through, which is an interesting choice, and part of what reminds me of Inferno about this movie, which I'll get to in just a sec in more depth. This movie is very much in this tradition of late 60s going into the 70s and onward, occult horror, and it's a solid movie. The plot kind of drops off and doesn't go anywhere at the end, which is a major flaw, but other than that, everything that sort of goes down this movie is not super remarkable, but it's enjoyable and I liked it. So if you're a fan of movies in that vein, I think you would enjoy this movie. If you're a fan of, again, movies like Rosemary's Baby, movies like The Devil Rides Out, movies like Inferno, movies like The Omen or The Exorcist, I think you'll enjoy this one. So that is my review, my spoiler-free section of my review of Good Against Evil. Here are the spoilers. If it wasn't kind of already clear at this point, we find out when we're at the altar with the black candles and the statue, there's also these big pictures of Jessica above it with a pentagram, I think it's the wrong way again, drawn on her forehead, which adds to the cool look of the scene and also reveals that she is if not the Antichrist, she's the Satan spawn character, and she's supposed to be wedded to Astaroth and bring about this dark union that I'm not really sure what it's supposed to do, but that's the occultist's goal. Shortly after that, Jessica and Andy go horse riding together. This freaking cat again appears out of nowhere and scares the horse, and the horse almost tramples Andy to death and almost gets to Jessica as well, but this random Satanist is lurking in the shadows and kind of jumps in at the last minute and is like, no, you must not harm the Dark Lord's spawn. He doesn't say that, but we all know he's thinking it. He jumps in the way and the horse tramples him to death instead. After this, Jessica freaks out and sort of tries to cut herself off from Andy and play it off like, I actually don't have any feelings for you, but it's revealed that she's had 2 boyfriends prior and both of them have died horribly. And she's just like, everyone I touch dies. And it's pretty clear that this is due to some occulty stuff. She's sort of forced herself to isolate herself from any kind of romantic affection and possibly any like legitimately close friends too, which is really painful for them and really painful for her. So that's a very good dark story element, but she kind of overcomes this at one point and comes back to Andy, and the occultists are just like, no, the power of love must be destroyed so she can be wedded to Astaroth. And then again we have another scene like that where, you know, they're just hanging out and being all romantic and stuff in the attic somewhere, and it's all fun and games until the big glass window randomly caves in and the feisty cat comes back. She freaks out again and some stuff happens, and then after that we have my highlight of the movie, which is the part that most reminded me of Inferno, although it's not as gory, or bloody at least, which is this woman who's basically Jessica's boss at this fashion shop where she works. We've figured out that she's secretly part of this cult of Astaroth, and the snooty head of the cult comes in and is talking to her, and she's just like, I told you this is just sort of, I don't know what she calls it, but she's just like, this thing between Jessica and Andy, it's going to pass, I promise you. This isn't anything. We'll still win. Please don't hurt me, oh God. And the windows open and just more and more cats gradually start filling the whole room as this guy's just sitting there and just sort of glaring at her stony-eyed and stony-faced over this wine glass, and just cats are just pouring into the room, and the guy just leaves and locks the door behind him, and one of the cats jumps on her, and it's just this cut. So she just gets felined to death, basically, much like in Inferno, although we don't actually see as much of it as we do in Inferno. So that was a highlight of the movie, because the kitties are actually kind of adorable, but they're just tearing this woman apart, so yeah. And then after that, we've met this father of this church who is supposed to marry Jessica and Andy, and they've walked into the church and she's been very hesitant to step into the church, as you could expect. And the father comes back to Andy and is just like, can we put off the wedding? I could sense the presence of Astaroth around her. And he's just like, the hell are you talking about? And it turns out hell is exactly what he's talking about, because later Andy comes back and the church has just been desecrated totally. These statues have gotten their heads lopped off, and there's a big pentagram, the wrong way again, painted on the altar, and it's very wonderfully creepy and dark and blasphemous. So I thought that was a good part of the movie. One of the more interesting story aspects is that we found out earlier that Andy had a previous girlfriend or love that he had broken up with named Linda, and she had actually gone off and gotten married and had a child. And Andy picks up this newspaper that shows that Linda's daughter had gone into a coma, and while she was in the coma had drawn this freaking pentagram the wrong way again. And he runs to the hospital to like help her, they actually reunite, which I wasn't expecting. Meanwhile, Jessica is in the custody of the occultists and is like reunited with her old family, and she's happy there and is probably kind of hypnotized as well. It's strange. The two of them reunite, and then after they've heard from the doctors, you know, your daughter is going to be just fine, and they go home and they're sort of becoming a little bit more romantic again. This random old man just appears at the top of the stairs in their house and is just like, your child. And it's just like, where the hell did this guy come from? And it turns out he's a priest, a holy man, and he tells them that, you know, your daughter is not all well and good, and they run back into the hospital, and just all over the walls are all of these pentagrams scrawled everywhere. I probably don't need to tell you which way they're facing. This big passage of evil, sort of, the evil one shall be made flesh and shall rule over the earth type thing. And it turns out that's what Andy got from the weird fortune teller guy before, and it's just like, wait, what? They freak out about that, and then the holy man's like, okay, now I have to perform an exorcism on your daughter. And they're like, wait, no. And he's like, yeah, this is the only way to do it or your daughter's gonna die. And eventually they agree. And there's a big, long exorcism scene with him fighting with Astaroth. And Astaroth, like, eventually knocks him over and tries to smother him with a pillow. And so we just see him struggling in the corner of the room later on with a pillow over his face. And there's all this stuff happening. And then right when he makes a recovery from that, and they're gonna leave, and they're gonna go and find Jessica and fight Astaroth, and he's rekindled his romance with Linda. They drive off, and it pans over to this cat sitting on a bench and zooms in on it, and the movie just ends. Nothing is resolved. It just ends. The hell. Anyway, like I said, good movie until the story stops existing. So if you like occult horror movies, don't expect any kind of satisfying conclusion or any kind of conclusion, but if you like occult horror, I think you'll like this movie. So that is my review of Good Against Evil from 1977. Thank you for watching my video, and hopefully I'll see you in another one. Bye!